What's up, everybody? This is Jack Stewart from Jack Attacks Discs, and today I am going to help you dye your disc. I'm going to use 3 different methods of dyeing, and I feel like that way it's the best tutorial because it gives you a few different options. But yeah, basically we're just going to take you through the whole process today, and I hope this helps out for anybody who wants to get into it. Starting off, there's different plastic types, stuff you should probably know. Some discs dye better than others, and so you probably want to do some research on that before you start, but I am going to give a quick rundown here. Base plastic, so R-Pro, your putters are usually like very chalky, very grippy, rubbery, and that's great for a better grip when putting, but it's terrible for dyeing. It usually doesn't turn out well. Super hard to take color, maybe super dark colors, but even those fade after time. Next up, we have like sort of the champion plastic, the see-through. And while this will take color, it's always going to have that see-through kind of glassy effect. So if you want like a stained glass design, I think this is like awesome for that. But just know it will always still have that like see-through aspect to it. Lastly, everybody's favorite is like the premium plastic Star, for example, from Innova. You also want to make sure you always get a white disc. You can always add color, but you can never take color away. So starting with like a white disc is the way to go. And just a little cheat sheet here, you can save this. Here's a list of popular manufacturers, and these are like their version of premium plastics. You have Star from Innova, ESP from Discraft, and so on. So these will be like your best bet when looking for a plastic to dye. All right, and starting off, step 1 obviously is prepping the disc. You don't want to just rush into it. Here we have acetone. We're going to use this to wipe the stamp. You can leave the stamp on. You can take off part of the stamp. We're just going to wipe it. You want to keep acetone in an enclosed container. I use this like mason jar here. It evaporates super quickly. So when you're not using it, you want it to be, kept away. A quick tip here for wiping the stamp. This is from a lot of trial and error. I always make 2 paper towel ready with acetone. And the reason being, in the time it takes to get from one to the other, your disc could already be smudged like permanently. So I'm gonna get this first paper towel ready with acetone, and then I'll make the second one. And that way, it's just ready to go when you need to switch if there's too much color coming off of that stamp. You'll see what I mean in a second here. But yeah, this is basically to ensure that none of the color gets left over. So here we are wiping the stamp, and as you can see, it's starting to smudge, but the paper towel is full. It can't take any more color. And so that is the danger zone where you can leave color on the disc if you take too long. You have to be very quick when it comes to this. So the backup is already ready, and now we're just going to polish that off and make sure that we have a nice, clean, white surface before we start dyeing our disc. Step 2, creating and applying a stencil. For this, we're going to use Cricut, both the app and the Cricut cutter. I'm not going to give like too detailed of an explanation here. I feel like that's a separate video. We don't really need like a Cricut tutorial, but I'm going to show you what I do. First of all, you're going to want to upload your design into Cricut. They have some preloaded designs here, but this is for a customer actually, and so we're going to use the design he sent. So here you go into your photo library. A lot to choose from here for my personal photos, but we're going to go with this one, the one that he sent. And first we're removing the background, and basically what we're going to do is get rid of everything on this image that is white, anything that isn't black, because we're making our outline. We're basically creating like a coloring book image. So we just want that like that black border. You want to put your color tolerance very high. And what that does is when you are removing background in like corners or tight spots, it's going to get a lot more of it. Where if you keep the color tolerance low, it's going to leave a bunch of like kind of like, I don't know, residue or leftover color. So this just makes it for a much sharper, cleaner image and gives you more space to work with. So keep that color tolerance high. And we are just removing every little aspect of white from this image. And then you definitely want to give it a very thorough once over once you're done to make sure you didn't miss a spot. because obviously once you start cutting, you cannot recut. But now we have our image. I'm going to name it here. Not really sure. We're going to go with anime stuff. Not familiar with this character. But now we have our design into the Cricut user interface. And again, the interface is updated like very often, so this will probably already be outdated. But we're going to create a circle from shapes here, and we're going to make it 9.25 inches. That's a little bit bigger than your average disc. And why we're doing this is it's going to help a lot with centering our image later on onto our disc. Tough to explain now, but you'll see what I mean a little bit later. So we put that to the back layer, make our image small enough to fit. And again, you want it to be a bit smaller than you think, because this is not the size of a disc, the circle. It's a bit bigger than the disc. So you kind of have to use your imagination a little bit there. We want to join and align the two images because it makes one like set image that the Cricut will be cutting. If not, it cuts them separately. So it'll cut like a circle into your vinyl and then the image somewhere else. And we specifically want our image inside the circle to, again, to help with like centering. I'm going to put it on the 12 by 12 mat. That's what I'm using. Here, you definitely want to center your image a little bit. The sides of the mat can peel up a little bit. And so it's just safer to kind of center your image. It gives it like a little bit of like a safety border. And now it is time to cut. I am using this Cricut, I think it's called the Joy printer. But yeah, it's all automatic. It just cuts the design for you. I don't know how you would do stencil work without a stencil cutter. But the process, depending on how complicated your design is, can take a long time. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but this feels like a premium opportunity to go feed your dog some snacks. Good boy. That's Norm. He's our HR department. All right, back to it. Now that we have our vinyl printed, our first step is to remove this outer border so that we're left with just the circle. We don't need any of that, the outer square. And again, this is all to help with centering our design. I've seen people use like laser pointers and other things to get their image centered, but this works fine. We need transfer tape now. We're gonna remove the vinyl from its like backing paper and then transfer it to the disc. Here, I like to kind of fold it like a hot dog and then spread out to the sides. It feels like that gets me like the cleanest transfer without like bubbles or I don't know, bubbles, I guess. And so here again, we're flattening out so there are no bubbles. It's just one smooth piece. As you can see, I leave a little bit of overhang on one side, the bottom left there, and that is because when I peel this off, it won't get stuck to any of the transfer tape that's like hanging underneath. So there's a nice clean edge there. Pro tip, you do not want to pull the backing paper upward. You want to pull it very much like sideways, and that's going to help to not peel up any unwanted pieces of vinyl, and you get that nice clean separation there. So all the vinyl stays on the transfer tape, and that way it all goes to the disc. Now, this is sort of what we've been talking about. Because we have our circle and it's a bit bigger than the disc, this makes it super easy to play the crane game here and make sure your x-axis and y-axis are centered. You just give yourself a little bit of a bird's eye view. And then when you place the disc down, so long as like it's basically centered in that big circle, you know that your image is going to be centered on your disc. So again, a lot of people get a lot more intricate with this, but I really think just eyeing it can be close enough. Now I like to fold the transfer tape over all the corners and stuff. You can separate the transfer tape from the disc at this point. And for certain dies, I think that's the way to go. But for this one specifically, we're just going to leave the transfer tape on. It adds a second layer of protection from getting any unwanted dye onto the disc. And then we're going to flatten out any of those bubbles or creases one more time. Now, this is a tricky part. We are going to separate the transfer tape from the vinyl, but only over the parts of the image that we're using. It's kind of complicated, but I promise it's going to make our next step a lot faster and a lot more simple. So yeah, I start with like a little tear in the transfer tape and then just start slowly peeling these like bigger circles out. And we still want to leave transfer tape around all the edges because again, it's extra protection. But this is what you're going to look like. I did pull up a little bit of the vinyl, but it's where color needs to go, so it's okay for now. But yeah, as you can see, just the image is uncovered, and that leaves the disc extra protected. Now, this is why we do that, is because when you pull up the vinyl from the backing paper, it's very easy to pull up spots that you want to stay. The vinyl kind of sticks together and it's hard to separate, but the vinyl sticks to the plastic really well. So now we can remove these parts, and all the parts that you want to stay on the disc, stay on the disc, and all the parts you want to come off rip a lot easier. Important, again, I've messed these up so many times by like kind of having the picture in my head, but you definitely want your phone or like a reference image of what parts you are supposed to remove and what parts are supposed to stay. And this is our final image. It can be a little confusing because the white parts are going to be black and the black parts are going to be white. So you're sort of seeing like a negative image here. But basically, we're just removing all the vinyls so that we can make our coloring book image here. And we're going to fill that all in with black. And starting off, this is our first actual dye, 12 minutes into the video. This is the hot dip method. This is the best method for getting very dark blacks, which is like kind of hard to do. This mixture is very simple. It is just water and black dye. I'm using ProChem. They make the best dyes for disc golf dyeing. They even have like a specific section for it. But yeah, it's just water and dye, heat it up, and that's going to be our mixture. Important note, make sure if you have an oven fan that is on, open some windows. These are toxic chemicals and you do not want to be breathing that in. Before I put my disc in, I like to do one last mix of like the dye in the water to make sure there's not any dye sitting at the bottom. I don't know if that helps. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a scientist. I just sort of do what works and hope for the best. The heat is on very low. That's important to mention too. I think I'm on like 1.5 on the burner. If it is too hot, it will cook and warp the disc, which you do not want. Before you put it in, make sure you press down any last remaining bubbles or creases so that dye doesn't like leak into parts of the disc we don't want. And when putting the disc in the solution, we want to go very slowly, very controlled, and you kind of want to roll the disc into it, like start from the bottom up to the top, and that way we get less bubbles or air pockets where the dye doesn't touch the disc. And this can take 10 to 15 minutes when you pull it out. If it's not dark enough, you put it right back in. But yeah, it's just the waiting game at this point. And I'm not one to tell you how to live your life, but this feels like a good time to give some food to one of the cats that hangs out on your property. That right there is Bert, young Bertram. Good boy. All right, now we're gonna get some hot water going. You do want it to be very hot. When I transfer the disc from the dye, I like to put a bowl underneath so that I don't get permanent black dye on my fiance's countertops. And yeah, we want to use hot water because it heats up the glue on the vinyl and makes it easier to peel off. We're just going to let this run for a bit and get most of that dye off of there. But there will be some left over, so you definitely want to take some like paper towel and get the rest off of there. But you want to, I kind of messed it up here, you want to rub very gently at this point because the paper towel can clip some of the vinyl, like the corners, and peel it up, which we don't want. I also got a bunch of dye on the bottom of the disc. If you care about that, you know, that's fine. I never really care about the bottom of the disc. I feel like those usually get dirty. And now we're just peeling off the vinyl and the transfer tape from the outside, but we're leaving all of that stuff on the inside because our next step is going to be the background. So we have the outline of our design, and now we're adding the background behind it. And this is probably the better way to dry it. Just put it upside down on like a paper towel, and that way you're not pulling up any of the edges. But if you're like me and you do pull up the edges, I have a solution for you. That's what we're going to do next here. So step 4 is the glue bed, and this is going to be setting up for our next dyeing process. But first, if you have any areas of white that you don't want to get dye on them yet, pretty simple solution. We're just going to cover them with glue, and that's just going to, create a barrier from any of the dye getting onto your disc in those spots. So I start by putting a little daub everywhere where vinyl has peeled or where there's some white that I want to stay white. And then with a skewer here, just like separate it a little bit so it's less of a bubble. And then you just gotta make sure you have time to let the glue dry before you start dyeing your disc. Here's everything you're gonna need for the glue bed. It's pretty simple. You're gonna need a plate, some just white school glue, and then our solution for the dye is just cocoa butter, acetone, and powdered dye. Again, I used Prochem for various different colors, and I just keep them in the like little individual plastic tubes. Yeah. So first off, you want to start by making your glue bed, just pouring it into a plate. You do not want to put too much in because keep in mind, you're going to have dye on top of this and then the disc on top of that. So if you put the glue too high and then the disc in, it could spill out the sides and even ruin like the design that you have in the glue bed. So not too high. Now we're adding our dye. Make sure you shake it up first to mix the acetone, the dye, and the cocoa butter. I like to start with the darker colors first and put the lighter colors on top. And that helps to make sure that the lighter colors don't sort of get washed away by the darker colors. But I don't know if there's any real rhyme or reason to that. Now I am mixing up the design with a skewer. This is just going to add a little bit of texture and kind of like waves to the design. You can get pretty creative here depending on like how you do this, but you don't want to mix it up too much because the colors mix together and it adds like a brownish black kind of gross effect. The design that the customer sent me had a yellow kind of gold orb circle in the background, so I'm going to add that artificially here, just making a nice yellow circle, and then again using a skewer to kind of rough it up a little bit, make it look a little more natural. And yeah, after this we should be ready to apply the disc. Same method as before, we're going to roll the disc into the solution, and this is to help not get any air pockets or bubbles between the dye and the disc. I've definitely done it a lot where there's little white dots like all over your design and it looks pretty bad. So nice and slow, definitely the way to go. And now we have our dye ready, but we're going to add some heat. This is a burner, a warmer for like a buffet table, I guess. I ordered it off Amazon. I keep it on a very low heat because again, we don't want to burn and warp the disc, which I've done a lot. But yeah, this is gonna make it so the color pops a lot more by adding heat, and it's gonna make the process go a lot quicker. We're gonna cut this from like 24 hours to like 8 to 10. So yeah, a lot of time, and I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, of course, but this is probably a good time to feed the other cat that lives on your property. This is Ernie, the OG. He was here first, and he runs the roost. Good boy. Okay, now that the dye is done, we are using hot water again to make this this transition the easiest to clean. And it will make the vinyl the easiest to peel and not leave any like residue. I like to put my plate next to the sink so that you don't get any drips on your fiance's countertops. And then always, periodically wash your hands, try to get all the dye off of them. These are chemicals and you don't want them on your skin any longer than they need to be. You definitely don't need to be careful now when drying this disc off because all of the vinyl is gonna come off at this point. So yeah, we're just making sure to get all of the excess dye off first so that it doesn't end up leaking onto the white parts once we remove the vinyl. So, feel free, just make sure this thing gets all of the color off. Here's another little pro tip I've learned after a while. You can recycle the glue from your glue bed. So I always have like a backup container that I pour the glue into. nobody's getting rich off of dyeing discs. It's an expensive hobby. So this helps you save a little bit of money in between dyes because you can just use this on your next glue bed. Okay, now it is time to remove the last little bits of vinyl. Again, warm water is going to help a lot with this. It's going to make them peel a lot easier and without leaving like residue behind. Sometimes you have to use like Goo Gone or something to get the last little bit of like, I don't know, sticky remnants off of the disc. And here is what we are left with. We have one more process, but as you can see, we have our background. We have the gold ring, nice cosmic purple and green. And then our character is still all blank, and so we are ready to fill it in like a coloring book. And that leads us to our last step. Step 5, painting with dye, the third and final dye technique here. We are going to use the same solution of dye, cocoa butter mixed with acetone, mixed with Prochem powder. I use skewers as like my paintbrush, and then these little Dixie cups are great for holding your paint. And they're perfect because you're probably, when you get a little more advanced, you're going to be doing a lot of mixing colors. And so they're kind of perfect for that. So you're going to shake up your color. Make sure you do, get it all mixed up. And then I pour into the little Dixie cup, and a little goes a long way. Just, again, learn from experience. Don't be wasteful with your dye. And then, yeah, basically you mix it up with the skewer and you're good to go. At this point, you would start painting. But if you need a lighter color, you can add cocoa butter and it will soften the tone of the color. If you need darker, you can add a little bit of black dye to it through like the cocoa butter solution. Just be very careful because one dot will darken the color significantly. So be very careful you don't add too much. And now we are just painting by numbers here, filling in each spot. This is kind of my favorite aspect of the job. Great time to just throw on a podcast and kind of zone out and vibe. I do have my phone up again with a source image to make sure I don't get any colors in the wrong spot. And here's another example. I needed a lighter green, so I just add a little bit of cocoa butter and then I mix up that solution. And very important, it is always better to overmix than undermix. Otherwise, your dye, the color will look kind of splotchy on the image. So you definitely want to mix it up so it's all one solid color. And yeah, this is our last step. We are just coloring in. The skewers help you to get like some very precise sections done. But you know, it can be tough when they're very tiny white areas to fill in. And then lastly, we are just adding heat one more time back to the burner. A very low heat so we do not warp and mess up the disc. And when this is done, we just have to wash it off and our disc will be finished. So again, I use hot water, but you really don't need to at this point, I don't think. But this is just to get the dye kind of like, after a while, it'll start to get hardened. And so this like softens it back up. And then for this last portion, I use paper towel and I try to go very quick. I don't want any, and you want to keep it under running water so that you don't get any dye where it's not supposed to be. Yeah, this just helps it so you don't actually accidentally like rub dye into the background. Yeah. And again, there's no vinyl left, so give it a nice clean wipe. And then I would actually run over the image with my thumbs to make sure that there's no bumps, because that could be leftover vinyl. I have done that before where you don't see it in the meantime. And that is our disc. We have the background, the black outlines, and now the colored in image. Yeah, that's basically all there is to it. It's a long process, but it's pretty fun, and I really hope this helps you guys out on your dyeing adventure, your dyeing journey. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to get back to you. Other than that, this is Jack Stewart, Jack Attacks Discs. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Put it in your mouth.
Why?